You want to start introductions and we can go around. You, Steve, and I'm happy to go last.
All right. Hi, my name is Dmitri Leonov. I do a couple of things. I'm a co-founder of TaoPatch, which is a device. It's a wearable nanotech device that combines light therapy and acupuncture. I also lead Transformative Technologies Los Angeles. And so we have a transformative TransTech conference coming up in about a month, actually in exactly a month, November 12th and 13th. So if you're into tech and human transformation, you should sign up for that. Steven?
Excellent.
Great. Thank you, Dmitri. And hello, Elias, and hello, all of you today at the Life Summit. My name is Dr. Steven Schwartz, and I'm the president and founder of Bioharmonic Technologies, which is a human optimization technology development company using sound, light, frequency, and vibration. I own a music company, and we create something called sonic pharmaceuticals, which are somatic music programs for shifting and influencing physiology, combining brainwave states, sacred geometry, physiological frequencies, and a lot of other specific body-related components for shifting and influencing physiology. I'm also an author of a book called Primal Resonance, Discover the Secrets to Health, Vitality, and Optimal Human Performance. And it talks about the top 10 list on how to reverse aging and degeneration using sound, light, frequency, and vibration. And my most recent technology we developed is called the Vibe, Vibrational Individualized Body Enhancement Systems, the full body music activated vibrational technology. And I'm here to help share the information about during these changes in our times for expanding consciousness and being healthy and happy and optimizing human potential.
Yeah.
Excellent. So hello, everyone. My name is Elias Arjan. Welcome to Life Summit 2020, our little biohacking panel. I am a lifelong biohacker. Starting in college, I studied human kinesiology and performance and became a personal trainer and endurance athlete. And at that time, I just became sort of fascinated with the relationship between biology, performance, and behavior. So I've been exploring that world ever since. Currently, I act as the Senior Vice President for Biostrap. So we're a wearable measurement device that measures sleep, heart rate variability, SpO2, and respiration rate. We also can, so in ways we can quantify sleep and stress. So, it's a really interesting, I'm big into the sort of quantification of these sorts of things, big on the science side. But also at the same time, I'm a biohacker. Like Dmitri, we know each other because he runs TransTech Los Angeles. I run Biohackers LA. And so we produce a lot of events. I miss meeting people in person. We were doing 2 to 4 events a month prior to COVID. So I guess this is how we meet. I haven't been doing as many digital events with our LA chapter. So if anyone here is from our LA chapter, shout out to you guys. I miss you. And, we're here to talk about biohacking, and feel free to ask any questions. We have a little chat there. So this doesn't have to be a one-way dialogue or even a 3-way dialogue between us. Please jump in and ask any questions that you may have.
Yeah, please, folks. If you don't mind, just as we go, enter them in the chat. We'll maybe try to address them as we go. At the very least, we'll do it towards the end.
Right.
So, okay, should we get started? All right. So the name of this session is Biohacking with Waves. And I think this is a little bit, the just general topic is going to be a little bit out there. In general, so I know Stephen and I, we travel way out there in our conversations very, very often. I think... And actually, let me
I think it's not way out there. I actually think it's way in there. If we're talking about waves, it's actually about way in there and not out there. So that's how we're going to be able to most effectively biohack.
Yeah, so I think the general premise, and I'll go through a couple of things. I'll share my screen in a minute. The general premise, and I guess what I mean by out there is we're going to talk about stuff that's a little bit on the fringe, I'd say, of the mainstream. However, this fringe area is getting more and more popular. There's more and more people on that fringe. And the crazy thing about it is that it's actually, like, once you get there, you realize there's nothing controversial about it. This is very mainstream, 100-year-old science that is just not fully caught up with with the societal expectation of where we are. So the name of the panel, Biohacking with Waves. I think everyone in physics understands that everything is a wave / particle, right? And we and everything else is made with waves. So if you wanted to biohack or do anything else, why would you not do it with waves, which is what everything is, right? One of the stats, which again is very mainstream, if you take every human, the 7.5 billion humans on the planet, and you condense the actual physical hard, matter of us to, if you condense it as much as you can, all of these humans would be size of a marble. So what we would consider actual hard, matter is the size of a marble among all of us. Everything else is empty space, right? Which is where waves reside. So let me just pop the screen in just to set the stage a little bit, and then we'll go from there. And guys, please jump in if you have any comments. So we are waves, and the waves are light, sound, vibration, electromagnetic. We are heart rate waves. We are brain waves. And one of the things I really like, and this actually I stole this from Stephen, and I didn't really realize until Stephen mentioned it in one of our conversations, is if you take the C note on the piano, like the middle C, and you raise it 41 octaves up. So if you go 41 octaves up from the C note, that sound becomes light. So literally everything is the same thing, right? There's not even a fundamental difference between sound and light. And this is a key point that I wanted to, I think, start with, is that there is really a fundamental misunderstanding of just about everything in the mainstream conventional understanding of science. Even the physicists who dig deep into this stuff, they understand that everything is a wave. However, when in our day-to-day life, it's very difficult to live it. It's very difficult for us to intuitively understand that everything is a wave, right?
Can I jump in here and just add to that for a second, Dmitri? If you invited us to jump in, one of the things that, because I'm probably of this trio the most hardcore scientist, if you want to call it that. I work with physicians and clinical researchers every day as part of my job at Biostrap. I'm very much into the scientific method. I'm a strong proponent of it. And so I'm a science guy, basically, But one of the things that I would say is the fundamental problem with science right now that has become very relevant in 2020 is that, for example, some of the research papers that our company's been working on are being published in 2020. They were started 2 years ago because they went into scientific review. And then the idea of getting the money for that probably goes back 5 years. So imagine in 2015, you were trying to analyze human health, right? So you were doing a study on human health in 2015. You had the concept. You went and took it to get funding. You spent a year or two to get the funding. Then you actually started doing the research that took 18 months to 2 years to plan. And by the time you actually get it published in a journal, it's 5 years later, right? The research getting published in 2020 that was started 5 years ago is not relevant right now. It's not speaking to the immediate need of our society in this moment. Because so this is probably, I would say, my perspective is the fundamental problem is that the world and even what's even happening in the world of science cannot what's happening in the world, the mainstream system of science as we've been working with it can't keep up with the pace of change.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying, but I would just wanted to just add, like I would word it slightly differently, is that the pace of knowledge and information is so fast that the system of, grant-based research and published studies and double-blind, placebo-controlled, it's like that system can't speak to our human experience today. And that's, I think, one of the big problems we're facing. I think that's the crisis of science of 2020. And that's why people are losing faith in experts right now.
That makes sense.
Well, I think also on that same note, if you're looking at double-blind studies, the traditional way of doing research, it's not quantum-based, it's Newtonian-based. And when we're talking about waves, we're all in quantum-based technology. So this opens up the window for all kinds of new research methods that have been definitely, like Dmitri said, out there in the past. Like when you're measuring, how do you measure biofield? Oh, that was super hippy-dippy, but that's been around since the 60s. And really, it's actually really relevant because it registers the electromagnetic field of the body, which now, if you're looking at waves, that's fantastic. Another way I know that I'm really looking into like live blood cell analysis. That's really 3D, but it's also very real time as well. Heart rate variability. I mean, I work with that every day, testing the way that your autonomic nervous system can re-regulate. And I know that's been the gold standard for a long time for looking at more, I guess, alternative ways of doing diagnostic testing. So we're at a very pivotal time of transition. And that's what's exciting, I think. I've never really been one. I'm a hardcore scientist, and I spent 16 years in clinical practice working reversing chronic illness. And I was definitely the out there doctor. But at the end of the day, though, the results that we were getting trump anything I was out there using standard technology. So I was totally fine with it. But what's crazy is that here in 2020, we're left in a place now where people are looking, okay, medicine, what do you got for us? And they're like, well, just wait for the vaccine or wear your mask. And humanity knows there's something more than that. So now, like, well, maybe if we're just healthier. So it's great that this whole planet is waking up to that concept right now, and everybody's looking to biohack. Yeah,
biohacking's taking off right now because of this. Absolutely, because everyone's like, well, like you said, that's not good enough for me, right? Like the average person, even the average person who never explored biohacking, is right now looking at that solution and saying, oh yeah, just stay at home and wait. It's like, what?
Wait for the vaccine.
That's what you got? Like, that's all you got? There's nothing else. Like, what about my immune system? What about, people just fundamentally even ask that, right? Even if they don't even know what impacts their immune system and all the things they're doing that are suppressing or impacting their immune system. It's like, well, isn't there something I can do? Right? I mean, human beings have been coexisting with viruses since the beginning of time. Viruses predate humanity, right? So we're 1 trillion cells. And of that 1 trillion cells, I already have a ton of viruses that I'm hanging out with, right? So these guys aren't my enemies fundamentally, right? That's just, it doesn't kind of add up. Like even the scientific explanation of this doesn't add up. And there's a lot of scientists and physicians, talking about some of these other ideas. But I like what you said, Stephen, we're in a Newtonian model and we're in a germ-based model. And we need to go to quantum, and we need to go to terrain-based health theory, right? Where it's the terrain, the environment is deciding. You plant a seed. If the terrain doesn't let that seed grow, the seed could be a virus. If the terrain is resilient, that seed won't impact, right? Because the terrain is so strong. And that's what I try to do as a biohacker, make my terrain neurophysiologically so strong, so anti-fragile that, that I wouldn't be afraid of contacting anything, because I know I've trained my body to be able to respond to it.
Nice.
Well, I write about this in my book, Chapter 11, Eliminating Infectious Agents. There's one of my favorite words that I've always liked, but it's also it's an incredible process of bioecology, pleomorphism. And for those of you that are listening that are not aware of that term, pleomorphism, It's when you have there's more germs in our bodies than there are cells. And most of them exist in the gut, and they exist to maintain this normal gut biome that's so important, because that's what allows for the breakdown of enzymes and vitamins and proteins and all these things to really be metabolized healthy. However, when the system is stressed, it goes through a process known as pleomorphism, where literally the life cycle changes from a 3-cycle healthy germ-based process for homeostasis into a 16-cycle pathological process, which is due to stress from the environment, and so now this gets even crazier, because these germs, they end up converting into pathological bacteria, into pathological pathogens, and you know what creates it? Bioresonance. Now we're talking back in 2 waves again, because it's from the bioresonance of your environment for which these things are going through is changing the pleomorphic expression of the cells. And I've always felt that be really fascinating. And really, that's the foundation of working and reversing chronic illness, autoimmune diseases, chronic systemic inflammation. And I've always looked at biohacking as kind of a human optimization process, where more people are coming in, how do we be better, more than coming from, I'm really sick. So I'm sure the lines get blurred somewhere in the middle. You know, people that are running off to the rheumatologist or running off that are just trying to like get out of chronic pain. But I also feel there's a lot of people like, wow, I'm relatively healthy, but how can I be more healthy? So that's where I kind of think in the biohacking world, you know, how can we optimize that? But I'm sure that's for another panel we can talk about another time.
Well, we don't want to take you away from your slides, Dmitri. Go ahead.
No, guys. This is the slides are just a slide conversation director.
Okay.
But this is perfect. But let's get back to waves, though. That's a good point. It's in the subject of our talk.
Well, shouldn't maybe? I think it sounds to me like all 3 of us might have slightly different definitions of biohacking, and that was the first question that was asked. So maybe we should just deal with that as a fundamental, because sure. I think one of the interesting things about biohacking in general is that it's subject to, at this point, it's a relatively new phenomena, and it seems to be interpreted differently by different individuals. So maybe we should just do that quick before we move on.
Go ahead.
Sure. Oh, want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Well, my experience with biohacking has changed a lot. I would say I was a biohacker before the term was popularized, in the sense that I've always been, and I think a lot of people are. I think when you explain biohacking to a lot of people go, "Oh, I do that. Like that's what I do," you know. So it's to me though, there's a couple things that are fundamental. One is that you have decided to no longer outsource your health, meaning that I have not given the responsibility for my personal health to any other individual, you know, outside of my life. I am the ultimate arbitrator of my own destiny with regards to my neurophysiological health. To me, that's a key to biohacking, because as soon as you outsource your health and you let other people decide, you've taken that responsibility away. And I think that's why we're in a mess where 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy and 60% of people have chronic disease. I mean, that's because we outsourced our health. So that to me is step 1 in biohacking. Take responsibility for it. And then step 2 is experimentation. You have to do something, and you have to try to quantify what you're doing, because the biggest problem, I guess, I feel, and again, I was guilty of this, is actually the reason why I joined Biostrap as a company, is I wanted to understand what are the inputs from my environment, food, stress, thoughts, all of these things, waves, you know, intervention. So I could use the TaoPatch, I could use the Vibe. How does that actually affect me? And I need to do some experimentation. I need to go and understand. And that's why, to me, I'm like I said, I'm the science guy here. So that's why I work with Biostrap, because I want to be able to do some testing. So let's say I look at my blood markers. I do an intervention. Right now I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor because I'm testing how my body responds to different food inputs, right? So I'm like, you know, I'm this quantified guy. So I want to understand this input. So I eat, you know, I'll use my glucose monitor for a moment. So if I eat a more high sugar food, how is that affecting my CGM, my glucose levels? And I can just look at that on my app. So then I can know, to me, that's the key to biohacking, because I know, oh, my body responds extremely well to, eggs and not very well to, I don't know, peaches, right? Like peaches just spike my blood sugar. And so, and create an insulin response that I don't want to like contribute to. Because again, even with fruits, some people, and this is the last part of it, is the third part is you have to understand it's an N=1. So what spikes my blood sugar may not spike Dmitri's, may not spike yours, and vice versa. So that's why we need to test, because I need to know peaches may be great for my physiology and bad for someone else's, right? I found out that myself, I cannot process carbs. I've had to go full keto. I was vegetarian for 20 years and it was bad for me. So I've had to go full keto and I can't process carbs. So, but I didn't know that. I wish I had known that 10 years ago because I didn't have these tools, and now I do. So just to summarize real quick, 3 things. So biohacking, responsibility for your health. We do some sense of self-experimentation, and you have to understand that you're unique and find your own path.
Well said.
Yeah, love that.
Go ahead. My definition of biohacking, I feel like I've been biohacking since 2000, before there was even, I never even heard of the term before, but it's a great term.
Yeah, it's good to drop it in, right?
It's a great term, but what's really interesting is I was like, oh, about biohacking. Outside of the biohacking community, people's like, what's that? Which I think is really interesting. I feel like that's kind of a mainstream term, but maybe not as much as we think. I actually prefer the word instead of biohacking, I prefer the word bioharmonizing, because I really feel that that's really what we're ultimately trying to go with. And Elias, I agree with you. I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm a chiropractor, so people will always be coming to me, but really my number one objective is what I refer is the self-care revolution. That's what's really happening now. It's about self-empowerment for my clients, because everybody come in with, I specialize with chronic illness and allergies, by the way. You know how many times you were my typical patient that we'd see in there. And it's one thing, you can do an elimination diet or you can change your diet based off the testing, but I would go in through kinesiology or through biofeedback systems, and we would design, we would start reprogramming errors in your immune system and literally reprogram the waves, the bioenergetic field, based off of emotions and chemistries and a variety of other different triggers. And they'd be gone. So people could consume those foods. Then you're like, oh, well, I don't want to consume, carbs or sugars. That's true. And that comes down to education. I think people need to be educated about their health and what they're putting in their bodies and what's being put into their fields and what's going on in their brains, what they're thinking about as well. So, all these factors are there. I feel really blessed that I'm able to be kind of a steward of that information to my clients. But ultimately, I'm wanting them to take responsibility for themselves. Because what I know is people with chronic illness, as soon as they start taking responsibility for themselves, their health begins to improve pretty much much quicker. And now we then start piecing in all the different pieces together, and then they start feeling better, and they become now just getting out of being a place of being in chronic pain or chronic inflammation or whatever. Now, how do we move you into a place of optimal human performance, which is really the lane that I prefer to be operating in, and really the lane that I really feel I want all my patients to be in.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay.
Dmitri?
Yeah. So for me, it's I partially agree with what you guys are saying. I think it is about taking personal responsibility. Nobody else is going to do it better. It is about experimentation, 100%. For me, it's figuring out what's my goal and what's the way for me to get there. And so having again, the fundamental understanding of how our body works, what role, biofield, our emotions, our mental focus play on absolutely everything, including our body. That is a critical piece. So I combine neurohacking with biohacking, and I look at it more that way. So I don't experiment as much with food as I probably should, but I do experiment a lot with different practices that affect the way I feel and the way I function.
Right. Well, I mean, I loop neurohacking into the biohacking because, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the most powerful things that science has proven in study after study is the power of the placebo and nocebo effect, right? It's the best. It's the best drug there is. If I give you a sugar pill and your mind is so committed to the fact that that sugar pill is going to have an impact on my physiology. So this sugar pill is going to make me calm. Somebody tells me this sugar pill is going to make you calm, and I believe it 100% with my entire being, and I take that sugar pill, what's going to happen? I'm going to get calm. I'm going to produce neurochemicals that are going to calm my nervous system. I'm going to produce chemicals in my gut that maybe increase my serotonin levels. I'm going to force my body with my mind to do the things I want it to do because I believe in this external input, which is amazing if you think about it, right? So that's what you're talking about, Dmitri. It's like, you're saying, well, maybe don't worry so much about the peaches, but how do I make a relationship with the peaches so they don't like if I psychologically can find a way to have them not spike my blood sugar? I mean, I think that's cool. I think that not everyone's there as well, right?
Well, hold on. The two things. First of all, the placebo effect is the only common denominator between every single study that ever has been created, right? And it's what, like 10 to 20% on average?
Can be higher.
Or could be, like it's insane, right? Like
yeah.
But as soon as, I don't think it works in the way that you can control it, right? Because as soon as you realize it's a placebo, it stops working.
It stops working, right? Right.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
But I think.
But that's the thing. So again, that's the power because what's controlling, say, my liver function is my autonomic nervous system. So everybody on this call right now, take control of the enzymatic power of your liver right now. Go. You can't do it, right? You don't have control of that. It's happening, but you're not even aware that it's going on. So that's how placebo effect works, is that...
Well, you can't do it with your conscious mind, but you can definitely go in and reprogram it in the other than conscious aspects of the body. And that's where the effects of biofeedback have been so successful. I mean, that's been my biggest teacher. It's been incredible, especially in the placebo, because listen, I agree with everything you're saying about the placebo effect. However, I'd have people come in that wouldn't know anything about what was going on, especially as I was a kinesiologist. And I would go in my mind, not so much like I'm going to be doing this with you, but I'd go in very curious and very open. What can I find in the body? Oh, this came up. Wow, I wasn't thinking that. And I wouldn't be sharing that information with my clients. But next thing we know, boom, the physiology would change. And that really took me down a very interesting rabbit hole of exploring what is that phenomenon that's happening. Or like when the husbands would come in because the wives would drag them in to the clinic. They're like, I'm only here because my wife told me to be here, but I have this really bad whatever's going on. And they would get better. And so I feel that I refer to that actually as body hypnosis. Instead of what's going on with the brain, it's the nervous system that's being able to be influenced through the connective tissue, which feeds into the relay station of the brain and nervous system, central nervous system. But really it ties into through the living connective tissue matrix, which is influencing through the environment. And I really feel like that's the next frontier with working with clearing cellular memory and other aspects like that are really barely looked at all in overall health for long-term health correction and regeneration and age reversal.
Mm-hmm. Aging. Well, one thing I want to add is. So the key realization that I had pretty recently is that, so if we are really all waves, right, then what happens if okay, next slide. If everything is wave, everything is frequency, it seems that the consensus is that dissonance between kind of the wave structures of our body and mind and everything else, dissonance is bad, resonance is good. Right. So if everything is frequency, then why would we not use frequencies? Why would we not use waves to affect the waves that we are, right? And this is where all of this comes back into play, right? So how can we skip all of this other BS, all of the food, everything that we put into our body, and just hack directly basically go directly to source, which is all of these different waves, right? So how can we affect them directly? It's almost like going to the source code, So
that's why I have a pyramid in my living room.
Well, and all of your entire practice is doing it, right? So,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
Oh, as a very young doctor, I got introduced as a kinesiologist using these little glass vials that I put in people's biofield. Didn't know anything. My background's actually in sports medicine. That's what I went to chiropractic. That's what I went to undergrad for. And I got to say, none of this waves and energy work was nowhere in my wheelhouse, prior to 2000. And I would start seeing patients and putting these little vials what was in the water and vibrational frequencies. And I would just put them into people's energy field and muscle test. And I saw the damnedest things happen in my practice. And I would just drive home like, okay, I don't think I'm anybody like particularly special. I don't think I'm like some kind of psychic or some kind of, I don't think I have any superpowers. There's a physiological effect that is occurring here. And it took me down a very deep rabbit hole of exploring what exactly is happening on the physiological effects at the cellular level. Mm-hmm. And it took me into exploring mitosis, how our cells replicate, and signal transduction, how our cells communicate. Both of them are originating from the same biological material, microfilaments, microtubules, and intermediate tubules. And their physiological effect does one very specific physiological process. It interprets the biofield, it interprets the environment through vibrational resonance. And from there, it activates chemistry. So then I said to myself, well, then why am I taking chemistry? Like, I want to go above. So let's start influencing at the above. And that was where really sound, light, frequency, and vibration. I said, what is that? And like you said, when you opened up with this, Dmitri, the only difference between sound and light is speed. And really, that's another thing when we talk about, I think what you're explaining here, Dmitri, is what I refer to as the science of transformation.
Yeah.
Like it's not some, crazy hippy dippy airy fairy process. It's actually a reproducible process that can activate. And this is where they talk about like the law of attraction. What is the law of attraction? What is the dissonance versus resonance field that's guiding us and pushing us in and out of places of our lives for allow us to grow or retract, to get sick or be healthy or to optimize ourselves? All of this comes down to one very basic principle. Are we in resonance with this? Or are we in dissonance with this? Are we spending our lives? This is what I love about HRV, by the way, Elias, is because it's showing, are we spending our lives in sympathetic response? Who are those patients? They're sick. Are we spending our lives in, wow, you look amazing. You're in a parasympathetic response. You're in rest and repose. Those people tend to usually be overall more healthy. That's why I use HRV all the time. It's really valuable information.
Dmitri, before we move forward, can I actually talk about what you just brought up, like the source code idea, if I may?
Please. Of course.
Can you go back to the slide where you list all the different waves?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's light and sound and brain waves. Oh, you walked away. Oh, there it is. Okay, so here's I agree with what you're saying, but maybe here's where I just see things slightly differently. Mm-hmm. I agree with this slide extremely well, right? But here's my thing around the idea of this maybe hacking a source code. Light, basically we're 1 trillion cells. And believe it or not, a lot of these cells and even these organ systems and everything else are all operating independently of each other. So essentially we're an incredibly complex organism, right? Just one human. And then we're interacting with the entire environment, right, of other organisms, and then all of the other sort of epigenetic influences, right? So what will happen is that you will be getting some inputs from light, some inputs from sound, some inputs from other vibrations, some inputs from other people's emotional states, some inputs by their, like the heart rate, heart math has done a lot of work to validate that your HRV, when you come into contact with another person, if you want to talk about frequency, that the heart, because it's our primary resonance generator in terms of what the sound that it's putting out, is actually being read by the other heart of the other human being you come in contact with. And then that resonance or dissonance is actually received by the body as information. And then our brain waves are producing this, our cells are producing this. So all of these are happening simultaneously. And I think the challenge is that there isn't like and this is what I have behind me here. It's called the Cognitive Bias Codex. So one of the cognitive biases is the idea of the magic pill fallacy. And so the idea that there is one way to manage all of those 1 trillion cells is, to me, just a fallacy. Is that it's a complicated equation. And this is why the biohacking to me comes in, because it's like it's individual. It's looking at all of the inputs. It's optimizing all of these inputs. And unfortunately, there isn't one input that is the master one. At least if there is, I don't think I've ever seen it. I've never seen anyone who can definitively prove that. And I wish there was, because I spent the last 20 years looking for it. If there was a magic input that you could just kind of press and then this would impact it. I went and, like, to just talk a little far, I went and studied with shamans in the woods. I went to mountains and I meditated with the Himalayan monks. Like, I did everything I possibly, with the Tibetan monks, I did everything I possibly could to see if there was one input that would sort of impact the system across the spectrum. And unfortunately, I was unsuccessful. Now, if somebody else has found it, I'm a scientist, I'm ready to be proven wrong. But that's kind of what I have experienced in my own life, and all of the people that I've ever worked with or seen. It's what you're showing here. It's optimizing all of that, right? Like reducing blue light, not looking at your computer all night, right? Probably Stephen has all these amazing sounds that if I listen to before I go to bed, I bet you my sleep is going to improve. And I can quantify that with my Biostrap, right? Doing things to manage your heart rate variability, all of these things, right? So there's all of these inputs, and it's kind of tweaking the whole system. I wish there was one thing that was the master switch, but again, I haven't seen it yet. That's just my 2 cents.
I mean, I agree with that. I mean, that's the whole point, though, is like we have to take it all into the equation. I mean, sound penetrates deeper than, light penetrates deeper than sound. And then electromagnetic fields, I think that's the big thing about, like, when people are dealing with, especially in the biohacking world, because it's interesting, because everybody's really into PEMF. PEMF is influencing the field. And light penetrates down and influences the way that the electrons orient themselves. Sound impacts on the connective tissue. And I've done tons of esoteric studies as well too, and there's different ways of working. Some of these illnesses or some of these imbalances exist in the energetic field. Some exist on the physical field. They kind of trickle in or they permeate themselves out. And I feel like that's the journey. That's the journey of finding what works for people. I don't think in my practice, we had multiple things. I mean, it consisted of bioenergetic work. I mean, kinesiology. I used minimal supplements, but I mean, I had a sound bed for many, many years. I worked with lasers, biofeedback systems, some minimal supplements, lots of probiotics, that was fundamental.
The microbiome, Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut, right? So obviously, I think microbiome is like you mentioned earlier, Stephen, is obviously a major contributor to a lot of people's suffering right now, health-wise.
I mean, that's a fundamental key for sure.
Yeah. I think, Elias, to address your point, I think that there is, I don't know what that one input is. From all the esoteric studies I've done, I know there is one. Nobody here on this planet knows what it is yet. But I think at some point we'll get there. That said,
aren't the aliens just going to come down and finally tell us? Isn't that the plan?
I think it has to do with transcending certain dimensional realities, and I don't claim
interdimensional portals.
Exactly right.
How do you speed up? How do you go from? Because really, I think the whole aspect about trillions of cells, and we're looking at the difference between sound and light. What I always find to be fascinating is, there's a physiological effect that occurs called photonic emission. And every time an electron goes from one electron shell to the other, it releases energy and sparks light. And so it's interesting. I've always thought to myself, wow, so if we're looking at 100 trillion cells, and then if we go inside of one cell and we see countless numbers of electrons that are making up within one cell, and then there's all these little sparks that's happening, why are we not just this big ball of light?
Right.
And really, that's what's being measured when we're looking at through like auric field testing and things like that. Through the piezoelectric effect. However, this is what's so fascinating, because that is existing in the universe, but not in the three-dimensional world. In this, but what happens is when we go on that electromagnetic field spectrum, light is faster than sound. So when we ground light, slow it down into sound, we compress, we come into our 3D senses of visualization, and we might not be able to see it, but that's really what I feel is we are light beings being grounded into a three-dimensional spacesuit. And that's where I feel that we can go in and do some manipulation in that area. And that's what I refer to as dimensional shifting, where we're literally, because once again, getting back to where this whole conversation started with quantum physics versus Newtonian physics, quantum physics is all about potentiality and waves versus particles. And so when we're able to take a particle, speed it up into a wave, and then align into a different dimensional reality of our choosing, and then slow it back down, we've just created a new reality for ourselves. And then that's theory, but now how do we apply the practical applications to that? And that's what I feel, my mission's all about. And that's what I feel this whole process that we're talking about is what are these parameters that can create long-lasting change for people to not just be healthier, but to also obtain optimal human expression.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to miss what people are saying here. Matthew threw in a couple of comments here.
Matthew, I wanted to address Matthew's comment. Yes, Matthew, we're not suggesting that everybody should individually attempt to modulate all the different waves. What we're saying is there are my company, we're working with light, and we're doing a lot of research on what light can do. There's plenty of very smart people, much smarter than us, who are focused on it. So yes, it might not be as personalized or as individual to each person, but there's a lot of research that is going into modulating those waves. Hopefully that addresses that.
I feel like this is exciting parts of this. Is a lot of this information isn't really is not law, and that's what I think is exciting. Is there's lots of exploration, lots of room for development, and that's where we're going with this. And I feel like what's our comparative to a medical system that's really heavily rooted in Newtonian based kind of outdated physiological effects. So where Elias is going with HRV and where we're looking at new ways of looking at the body. But I feel like the ultimate granddaddy of this whole situation is the basic laws of nature, and humanity is trying to determine that, decode that, because there's been miracles happen all the time. We might not be able to explain them. But then I think that's our journey as evolving as an evolving species, is what is actually going on in these cases. Is it placebo? Is there something else going on? And that's the journey. That's the exciting part about this whole thing.
So I can tell you this. Go ahead, Elias.
No, please.
Well, so I want to just talk for a second about we're our product is a little patch like this. It's called TaoPatch, and it's a little thing that you apply to different acupoints on your body. And what it does is it basically captures the heat from your body, so it captures the infrared energy and converts it into visible light, and it sends that light into your central nervous system, which sounds like, and by the way, it glows in the dark very faintly, so it's not a lot of light. It's not a powerful laser. But the effects that we see in patients in double-blind studies are insane. I mean, people with multiple sclerosis literally get up from their wheelchair after 15 minutes of wearing it. It's absolutely crazy, right? And there is, so we have some, critics from the mainstream Newtonian Western medicine who are saying there's no way this can work. So by definition, then it must not work, right? If I don't have an explanation for how it works, that means it doesn't. However, like, there's so much evidence that it does. And so, yeah, we have to keep experimenting. And I think at some point, science, our science knows how it works, but our science is a little bit, out there. Certain Western medicine doesn't believe in acupuncture, right? It doesn't understand that there are 12 meridians on your body and they function in a certain way. And so as a result, there's a lot of skeptics about acupuncture, despite the fact that it works. So, yeah, anyway,
maybe I'd like to just to jump into this, maybe as, like I said, a bit more from my perspective on, is that one, I think one of the other problems I think we have by even using the word science today is it's almost become to mean different things to different people. And I think the original intention of science, if you look at what the scientific method was supposed to be, is science is a moving target, right? It's not like a fixed series of rules, right? It's supposed to be that like I said, right now I have my hypothesis, but if somebody gives me new inputs that prove that my hypothesis is wrong, I should be ready to adapt on a dime. Like, I should be ready to you give me enough proof and I can change my hypothesis immediately. So if a new product or something comes into our direct experience that I can't explain, I don't discard it because it doesn't fit with my rule book. I need to actually figure out, okay, if this thing actually has impact, how do I change my rule book to include this new idea? So I'll give you one big one that's for me as a biohacker recently. I shared just with our group on Facebook the other day. A lot of people come into biohacking through intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is a big trend. So if people aren't familiar with intermittent fasting it's the idea that basically one of the biggest reasons actually people are unhealthy, and the reason where 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy is because of the levels of insulin resistance in our body, because we're constantly eating food. So this idea that we've heard for a long time that you should be snacking throughout the day probably is not good for most people, right? And so now intermittent fasting is saying I'm going to eat all of my calories within an 8-hour window. And there have literally been probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people around the world who have benefited from intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets. I know a lot of physicians personally who are using that to actually reverse people's chronic conditions right now. And so somebody went and noticed this himself. He was a scientist, a researcher. He did intermittent fasting. He said he lost, I forget, like 14 pounds or something like that. I have to look at the study again. And then so he decided he was going to go do a research project on it. He recruited people. He did a research, did a study to see if intermittent fasting in a research environment would impact health. And what do you think he discovered? It didn't work. It didn't work. Okay, but hold on a minute. It didn't work in his study, but I can show you pictures and get you anecdotes from 150,000 people who says this transformed my life. So what do you want to believe? What do you want to believe? Do you want to believe that one study that they couldn't get it to work, or 150,000 people who can tell you from their own personal experience, this changed my life and it was the best thing I ever did? And that,
so what do you think about that, Elias?
That's the problem.
I don't think that's a problem. I think that's, listen, I'll take results over some
clinical study, right? Yeah.
Day of the week. I think that's, the issue with that has nothing to do with the study. It has to do with the study. It has nothing to do, there's a gazillion factors of what goes into a study, none of which are really being addressed in most studies. Right. That's why I really, my patients, They come in, they feel great, and they're not taking drugs or pharmaceuticals, and they're reaching a higher level of expression. To me, that's what's most important. And have I been written up and all kinds of been called a quack and all that? Yes, I have. And you know what? People are like, oh, you can see that. You guys want to go Google it, you'll see it on there. And you know what? I kind of like it, because when you read about it, what they say about me is actually 100% correct. They just kind of put in like a derogatory stuff. But I read through like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing in my practice. And go to my YouTube channel and check out all the videos that we have of reversing all kinds of conditions that traditional medicine's not even touching. So I think that once again, it comes down to, this is what's exciting about where we are right now in this time of this global pandemic, is there are no rules anymore. Everything's different. And people are now open, like I've never seen humanity open to holistic options like this ever in my life, my entire life. And it's really exciting. And here's what I'm committed to. I'm far from a charlatan. I make all my music I create, all my research I do, I'm super scientific. I went to undergrad for science. I'm 100% based off of science. I've been exposed to so many different aspects through, once again, Elias, I've sat with shaman and done all those things as well too. And you know what? As I sit and study those indigenous studies, you know what it brings me back to? Wow, the basic laws of nature are in operation here. So how can I mimic what I call shamanic technology? Because, dude, I've had patients that didn't get success in my clinic, went down and sat in the jungle for like a week or so and came back, and next thing you know, they weren't depressed anymore.
So on that point, at the end of the day, what this all comes back to is biohacking. Biohacking is N=1. You are the sum total of your entire experiment. And what works for you is not to be inferred to work for anyone else at the end of the day. This is why you can't outsource your health. This is why you need to experiment on yourself, and you need to find your own path. Because at the end of the day, whatever any of us say, or any experts say, or any gurus say, or anyone says, may not work for you. And it's really that N=1. And I mean, for me, I guess we're almost out of time, but I'll do a quick plug for our company. Todd reminded that we should say that. So we have a booth here as Biostrap, and what we have is an N=1 experimentation device. What you can do is very simple. Think of any intervention that you want to add to your life. So I want to add TaoPatch to my life. So I get a Biostrap, I get a baseline, right? Because the thing is you can't know how something's impacting you without a baseline. And then so we generate it. It takes us 5 days to generate your biometric baseline. Once we have that baseline, you add your intervention. Your intervention could be anything. It could be intermittent fasting, could be TaoPatch, it could be sound frequency training, it could be starting a new gym workout. It doesn't matter. And you see how it changes your metrics over time. Now, keep in mind, one of the other problems with these experiments too is, especially with subtle technologies, the amount of time to have biological impact may be longer for some. So there's all these variables. And then you can conduct that N=1 experimentation for yourself, on yourself, by getting your own data. And that's what Biostrap is about. That's what we do. We empower people with a tool that all they have to do is wear this while you're sleeping. I won't go into all the details, but basically your nocturnal metric changes are showing your trends over time based on your nocturnal metrics scientifically can validate how your neurophysiology is changing. And so that's what we do. We're giving one away to somebody from the Life Summit at the end. So all of you here will be entered to win one. I think you also, and TaoPatch is giving some of their product away. So you can try it for yourself. But I would just encourage everyone, to understand that in this era where, every day there's a new report, drinking milk is bad. Drinking milk is good. Eating cheese is bad. Eating cheese is good. Drinking wine is good. Getting a little bit of wine. Then other study comes out saying wine is bad for you. You can't believe anything anymore. That's why people have completely lost faith in the whole system, because you can't believe anybody anymore. And that's okay. You're going to have to do a little bit of work now to figure it out for yourself. And that, to me, again, comes back to biohacking.
Beautiful. Guys, I want to address. No, it's perfect. I want to address a couple of questions. Robert, Matthew, thank you very much. And not to hijack the conversation and talk about TaoPatch, but I do want to address the questions. Yes, there are 2 articles out there. One of them is the one Robert, that you posted, is actually just referencing the other article. And that article really is just, the only point it's making is kind of what I said, is they don't understand how weak impulse of light can have an impact of that magnitude, right? And so because of that, there's just no way that it can work. Because of that, it must be placebo, despite the fact that we have double-blind studies. So here's what and I'm just going to bring it back to Elias's point about the N being 1. We have a money-back guarantee. Try it. If it doesn't work for you, we'll just send it back. We'll refund you. We have so far we have 5% return rate. Of those 5%, literally every one of them haven't done any kind of measurement. What we do is when you first get started, we ask you to at the very least take a video. And Elias, we got to talk about doing it something more official with you guys, because that's our number 1 problem. Just last week we had a customer, and by the way, you can go on our Facebook page. It's Facebook/TappatchUSA, and just look at all the reviews and see what people say. We had somebody who in the morning left a comment saying, "Hey, these things don't work for me. I'm going to send them back this afternoon." Later the afternoon, there's a comment under that comment, which is, "I went to my neurologist." This person had MS. "I went to my neurologist today, and my neurologist was blown away by my progress. So I'm gonna keep those things." So we see this happen all the time. It's completely mind blowing, and a lot of people don't think they feel the difference, and a lot of people are skeptical. But when you look at the video, when we just look at the tandem gait test, when you go to your neurologist and you perform the test, the results are very clear. And I don't want to talk about TappatchUSA. I want to talk about just the whole frequency wave-based modulation, just a new paradigm of biohacking, new paradigm of medicine that we're entering. It doesn't.
Well, I'd like to make a comment about MS, actually.
Sorry?
I'd like to make a comment about MS.
Please.
And all neurodegenerative conditions. I mean, in my experience, that was probably the most challenging category of conditions to work with when people are working with advanced neurological degenerative conditions, because their whole computer is degenerating. And really, when we looked at my patients that would come in, really that were under traditional care, they were under really toxic medical symptomatic based pharmaceuticals. Like there wasn't really a really good option.
There aren't. They're like, it's terrible, and they cost.
Yeah, and really, it's like we're just going to. All they're doing is they're trying to prolong you going into the wheelchair as long as you possibly can. Yeah. And actually, one of my most famous cases, I had a woman. She came in at 21 years old, brought in her X-rays. She was functional, but she brought in her MRIs, and her entire brain and spinal cord was totally covered with plaque, and she was having visual issues. That's why she came in. Anyhow, I started working through my biofeedback system. You know what came up as the root cause of it? Food allergies, of which I went ahead and I treated her. And I'm happy to report that she's a massage therapist. She bought one of these biofeedback machines, and she's a practitioner. She's 35 years old. And all the plaque is completely gone. And I've treated a lot of MS, and you know what? I've had challenges with them. You know, I'm not going to sit here. I've reversed all of it because, like I said, it's one of my most challenging patients. One of my most challenging kind of conditions, but for what is it, $300 bucks? What's your?
I just want to mention, I think we're at time, so I don't know how that works in terms of how the event is managed for our producers. Just want to mention. Okay, we can keep going. Thank you, Todd. I guess I just want to mention one thing here. Is And again, Matt, again, I can see, you know, I hear Robert, I agree with you, you know, to be skeptical. I guess what's happened to me is I become skeptical a little bit of everything. Maybe it's my age. I become skeptical in things on all sides now. So I'm not skeptical only, you know, I'm skeptical against kind of everything. And again, like I said, that's why I feel like from my experiences, it still becomes down at the end. It's highly personalized, right? And that, you know, some things have worked for some people that maybe another person in their wildest dreams will never have any impact. And that's fair. And I think maybe what we all need to do is, instead of being so sure of our own opinions and our own perspectives, is be willing to end our acceptance of what may work for other people. And I think that's one of the things that I think that's another fundamental flaw that we see in 2020 is the level of acceptance of each other's ideas has gone to essentially zero. If you don't agree with me exactly how I think you should think, you know, we're fighting. And it's like, why? I mean, human beings should be able to coexist. And yeah, that worked for you, doesn't work for me. Let's be okay with that, right?
And to your point, Elias, so one of the points that Robert is making is insist on peer-reviewed studies with large samples. So for a small company, right, that's trying to do really cool stuff, it is incredibly expensive to conduct a large study with. It's cost prohibitive, right? It's much easier for us to say, here's a money back guarantee. If it doesn't work, it's time.
Well, right? that's why we launched the Biostrap Labs. I don't know if you know about this, Dmitri. I think you might, but for those of you who don't know, we've actually just launched a division of our company to help do commercial studies for this reason. Now, again, you know, we're not claiming to be an institution or whatever, but what we can do is, because we have a measurement device and we have a user base with baselines, so some of them years of baselines, we can add an intervention and see how it impacts their life. We just did that with percussive therapy, with Theragun. And we just proved we discovered things that nobody even expected. We completely discovered things we had no idea. We had no idea these impacts were going to happen. It was a true scientific discovery on our side, because we had the device, we have all these metrics that we're measuring. We added the intervention, percussive therapy, on a specific protocol, and we just saw what the changes were. And this was, you know, a group of individuals. We didn't, you know, there was inclusion, exclusion criteria, but we conducted our own sort of commercial study. And again, we can execute that for a small company in, you know, 6 weeks. It doesn't take 4 years to get it done. And so you know, clinical trials for drug companies. I mean, the reason those things go on is because it costs like $6 million to get to the final stage. I mean, who's going to do that unless you know you're going to have this massive payday, and you have to be capitalized in such that you can go through that whole journey. And so that particular method is only going to be able to serve a small group of companies that can actually do that. The wellness industry is $4 trillion a year. So people are buying products, whether or not the scientists agree with them or not, because that $4 trillion worth of products are people just deciding, I'm going to try this thing, right, for myself. Now, I again, being a scientist, I am not okay. And the problem I have is saying, let's only go by subjective reporting, meaning that I think it made me feel better, so I'm going to keep doing it. That's where my mind is. That's where the scientist in me kind of draws the line. But you need to link objective and subjective, because sometimes the biomarkers or the blood levels are not the only thing you use to measure, right? They're a measurement data point. They're not the only data point. If the person is reporting, I feel amazing, and maybe their insulin levels weren't as, you know, my CGM says, well, that food is not great. My response was not amazing to that food, but I feel amazing from the food. What am I going to go with? I'm probably going to go with the fact that makes me feel amazing, and I'll be okay with that. That's my choice. So this is what I mean. It comes down to choice at the end of the day. It comes down to us being open-minded. It comes down to, you know, again, I just keep coming back to the same thing. It's an N=1.
Love that.
Any open source data sets what do you mean, Victoria? Could you elaborate on that? I wish I could talk to you and answer that question directly. Like, what open source data sets? You mean places to get data from? or like groups of people who have shared their results. I mean, there's a lot of people in the quantified self movement. I think there's somebody in this, one of the founders of the quantified self. I don't know when he's coming on, Todd, if you're on the call still, I think he's already spoken this morning. But yeah, there's a lot of places you can go to discover where other people have discovered for themselves. There's a lot. If you all want to go on Facebook, and if you look up biohacking groups on Facebook, there's a lot of groups that you might enjoy. Gary Wolf's quantified. Yeah, Gary Wolf already spoke today. Okay,
folks, we should probably try to wrap it up. Otherwise, I know we can continue for hours.
Thank you, guys. I would like to say I'm very interested. Definitely looking into your straps, Elias, and obviously Dmitri. I've been wearing my TaoPatch for quite a while as well too. So I'm glad we've got a chance to get in there. And you know, for what we're working with on my end, it's all through this journey of how do we influence chemistry through the living connective tissue matrix. And I just know that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, our bodies are being bombarded by information, whether we're consciously or unconsciously aware of it, and being able to put ourselves into a field of vibrational resonance of our choosing can create a major impact on clearing cellular memory. That was really where this whole journey began for me. There was 3 parameters: how to reduce inflammation, clear cellular memory, and balance the body. Inflammation was definitely working with pathogens and the gut ecology. But then I was like, well, what's the science of clearing cellular memory? Well, what is a cell? Cell's water and surrounded by a vibratory network. And so how do we change the vibratory information coming into the water and through the living connective tissue matrix? That was the beginning of my music company, Bioharmonic Technologies. And now we have full body delivery systems for to broadcast these programs through. And that's what we're all about at Bioharmonic Technologies, is helping raise the vibration and boost your immune system through sound, light, frequency, and vibration.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Todd, for having us here as well. Hope people got some information. For those of you, if you're also looking to gather data and do your own N=1 experimentation, one of the companies Biostrap works with is a company called Heads Up Health, which is a place you can gather your data from different devices. So you could even link your Biostrap to your Apple Watch, to your Keto Mojo, and gather all that data in one place. So there's a couple of those companies out there doing that. But encourage everyone to stay healthy and resilient, and let's all be good to each other, because there's a lot of volatility in the world right now. And so wishing everyone all the best. Thank you, Dmitri, for sort of helping to kind of organize this as well. Appreciate you having me here.
Thank you guys for joining. Thank you everybody for listening and for your amazing questions. This was fun. We should do this again sometime.
Yeah. Oh, and we got to have the guest. We got to have the guests though, Dmitri. Only if we have your special guests there.
Yeah. Have to get to bed. We're very late. We're in Europe.
Okay. Okay. Good night.
Have a good day.
Bye.